Hello, everybody. Welcome into Scores, Goals, and Touchdowns with Mr. Pat. Back with us again, we have the host of the main event, WXUTs, at Saturdays, 9 a.m. to 11. Also, the play-by-play for the Rockets.
Right.
And we have Arnold back with us again, who he does things.
Right. His resume isn't as long.
No.
Just gives us his opinion.
I'm just a pretty face.
Exactly. We have the biggest thing going on right now. College football is back, finally. Some of us had a very good time yesterday. Other of us were pretty much infuriated by the entire game.
Talking about Notre Dame?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll get to that. Don't worry. I guess we'll start with the game that played first yesterday. Ohio State just put a whooping on Akron, 42-0. Now, I know it was just Akron, but Ohio State did what they had to do. I mean, you play these bad teams, you expect to pound them. They had all these guys. How do you think they looked?
I think they looked pretty well. It was against Akron, but I think the main point of that game was to get the backups, mainly Braxton Miller, some playing time. You know me, I'm not the biggest Ohio State fan in the world, far from it, but Akron is Akron. They're not good, and Ohio State proved they're the much better team, and they dominated as well they should have.
I'll be honest with you, I wasn't really impressed.
No?
No, Akron was 1-11 last year in the MAC. They've been pretty much a perennial loser in the MAC for years. And, Ohio State kind of came out slow. I wasn't really impressed with Bowserman. I mean, they're a bad team. Ohio State was going to win no matter what. To me, they ran the ball very well, but I don't see this team really competing against the better teams like a Wisconsin.
No.
Braxton Miller, I didn't like even Urban Meyer mentioned it. He didn't even have a headset on during the game. It was Guyton and the other quarterback who I can't think of. And then they put Braxton in before those two guys. And that, to me, it seemed like a lot of disorganization.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, Bowserman was the right choice to be the starting quarterback.
Right.
He's the fifth-year senior. He's 25, almost 26 years old after playing minor league baseball.
I hadn't started a game since 2003.
Right. Back when I was in high school.
Now, Ohio State has the University of Toledo next week, who is also in action Thursday against FCS New Hampshire. Like I said, Derek was the play-by-play. I was working that game on the sidelines.
And I listened to it on the radio.
Yeah, Mark Beyer, best play-by-play guy in the business.
Right, yeah.
Nick, outside of Derek, of course.
Right. I look up to
But UT won 55-28. Now, there were a lot of... Oh, hold on a second. They were up 55-28. It was an FCS team, but how do you think they looked?
Well, not watching the game live, thank you, Buckeye Cable, for blacking it out on ESPN3. Just listening to it, it sounded like the defense was just ball hawking the entire game. Couple turnovers. New Hampshire is no slouch of an FCS side. They have been ranked in the FCS top 25, I think, for 90-some-odd consecutive weeks.
Oh, they're a good team.
right now.
Yeah, they've gone on the road before and beaten bowl subdivision teams, like I believe Navy a couple years ago, Army, schools like that. And Toledo looked like they were firing on all cylinders.
Yeah. What did you see from up top?
Once again, I wasn't really impressed. I'm going to be honest with you.
You saw it.
We did the play-by-play. New Hampshire was in UT's territory too much. I mean, they got the ball. They were pretty much in their territory. You look at the stats, I mean, the score is the only thing that really UT dominated in. Time of possession, yardage for runs, and passing yards were pretty much close. I think the thing that killed New Hampshire was not because they were an FCS team. If you look at their roster, most of the guys are freshmen, sophomores, and then sprinkled in with juniors. And they remind me of UT last year, where it was a very young team. They had talent, but it was just mistake after mistake after mistake. I mean, Peters had a 98-yard kickoff return, and then it was taken back because of a personal foul, and the fumbles and the interceptions.
There were plenty of that.
Right. So UT, they played very well. They played 2 good halves this year because they didn't do that all last year.
Yeah.
So that's one positive. But what you take from this game is I don't know if UT is good or going to be, I know they'll win the MAC, but I don't know how they beat Ohio State.
We'll find out. I mean,
Yeah, we'll
it was a
find
good
out.
stepping stone, I think, to lead into Ohio State, considering how big of a game that will be for them.
That actually leads into my next question. Now, there's a lot of pieces in place for UT to maybe definitely score some points, which they didn't do last year. But maybe give them a game. They have a new coach, new quarterback, still players being suspended. UT had a nice game against New Hampshire. Do you see them giving a game or even possibly maybe giving an upset?
Everything would have to fall into place perfectly. I think they'll give them a game at least for a half, maybe 3 quarters, but inevitably in a game like this, it'll come down to depth, fatigue, and Ohio State is Ohio State. They'll have more depth. Toledo will probably be worn out toward the fourth quarter. But starting Bauserman, who hasn't started a game since 2003, like we said earlier, he might be a little rusty. I mean, Akron wasn't much opposition. Toledo's ball hawking defense against New Hampshire, they might force a couple plays on defense. I mean, the closer it is later in the game, the more likely it is Toledo to pull off an upset. I don't think it'll happen, but if it did, it'd be pretty awesome.
No. The University of Toledo came away with an impressive win over University of New Hampshire, 55-22 on Thursday. Do I think they'll beat Ohio State? No. But the reason why I say that is because the defense is just a little bit step behind because they were falling for play-action fakes with University of New Hampshire. But the positive thing is that the Rockets have more of a potent offense with Dan and Owens looking good, and now it's no longer the Eric Page show with Reedy, Noble, and Stafford stepping up as receivers. Show.
Yeah. Eric Page is a game changer. He can score anytime he touches the ball. And I don't think Ohio State has someone of that ability.
Right. It's either you double Eric Page or do single coverage. And we'll see what Ohio State does.
Now, like I mentioned earlier, some of us were infuriated by some of the games yesterday. Notre Dame played University of South Florida. University of South Florida is no slouch. But looking at the final stats of that game, Notre Dame had over 500 yards of total offense. They moved the ball up and down the field, more than doubled their yardage. But what always is the story when a better team loses? Turnovers. It's unbelievable. They had 3 turnovers inside the 5. One of them that led to a defensive touchdown. They had their kicker, who set the record for most field goals in a row at Notre Dame, misses a chip shot. It was a comedy of errors. Whatever could go wrong at the worst possible time did go wrong. I mean, it was ridiculous. I know you were excited about that game.
I wasn't excited. I mean, I wanted to see Notre Dame come into the Big House 1-0 next week. But red zone turnovers are a killer. You can't win if you turn the ball over in the red zone, let alone, 2 times, 3 times, whatever it was.
Yeah.
The whole atmosphere, though, yesterday, I mean, it was just odd with the rain delays. The fact that, Lou Holtz's son is coming in to coach against the almighty Notre Dame.
First time Lou Holtz has ever picked against Notre Dame.
Yes. But USF is no slouch. They will be in contention. They're, I think, along with West Virginia, among favorites to win the Big East this year.
The Big East.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The Big
East.
The Big East.
Yeah.
We'll get that big BCS game check. But.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask real quick, Derek. The big story coming in through the offseason was Dane Chris versus Tommy Rees. They both played. Tommy Rees had over almost 300 yards passing in a half. Dane Chris just looked bad. I mean, he's a great.
Accurate.
No, he's not.
Horrible.
Do you think he should never see another snap unless someone gets hurt? Should he be done?
Do you want to win? That's the question. Do you want to win? I watched him. I seen on the 2-point conversion where he was supposed to throw it to the back pylon and he floated it. And the receiver, you usually when you do those floaters, let the receiver make the play. He didn't give him a chance to make the play. I mean, when he caught it, he would have been out of bounds. So, and I saw Chip Kelly. He was a little upset about that. Brian Kelly was a little upset. I seen him screaming at the players. It looked like they were just rusty. I mean, that's what you get in the first game. Yeah. I don't know Notre Dame too well, but are they very young? Because that's what.
No, they're actually a very experienced team.
Something with the turn. Something's got to give. Someone's getting chewed out in practice tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned that Brian Kelly screaming, which anytime there was a bad play, I guess they had a camera on Brian Kelly at all times because you see him and he was losing his mind, like his face was just extremely red. Now, you look at some of the message boards, ND fans are kind of in a tizzy about it. Oh, he's screaming at his players. But they used to get upset with Tyron Willingham because he didn't show emotion. I mean, is this much ado about nothing, or is they just, should he tone it down?
You can't please the fans no matter what you do.
Yeah. Especially on a message board. People are just going to type just to get their, their voice out there. I liked it. It's football. I mean, if you're making a mistake and you have 5 turnovers, I mean, do you want your coach to be sitting there like, oh, that's okay?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, come on. You guys technically should have won the game.
Oh, easily.
I mean, if you dominated in the stats, the thing that killed you was turnover. So someone wasn't doing what they were supposed to be doing.
Another thing I think that makes Tommy Rees stand out instead of Dane Chris, he was taking everything. Brian Kelly was screaming at Dane. You just had a deer in headlight look. He looked terrified. Tommy Rees would just calmly explain his position, and when he threw that pick that bounced off T.J. Jones, he immediately went over there, and when Kelly was yelling at T.J. Jones. He took blame for it. So, I mean, that was a big difference. Tommy Reese is a leader,
Right.
which I really like about him. Now, in the other game, we had an abbreviated game. Michigan just dismantled Western Michigan until Western Michigan just threw in the white flag, and Michigan just said, okay, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's kind of a weird thing. I mean, the
Yeah.
players heard about it in the locker room. Like,
Right.
they're sitting there waiting for the game to come in. The coach, Brady Hoke, comes in and goes, hey, we won, guys. Have fun.
And they're playing baseball out there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like a game delay.
As with the weather, like at Notre Dame, it was just absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't know if there was to be honest, someone said they were going to cancel the game. I'm thinking, is it like baseball? You have to play so many quarters or so many
Yeah, that's
innings?
what I
The
was
official rule is that you have to play at least 3 quarters, or unless the teams agree. I
Yeah.
mean, there was a minute and change left in the third
Yeah.
quarter.
No, I think it was about 3 minutes left.
Still, it was.
Yeah, and Michigan
the game
was close to
It was
scoring
34
anyway.
to 10.
Yeah.
Michigan was driving. The game was in hand.
How do you think Michigan looked?
They look good. The defense looked better.
Yeah.
Well,
the defense returned. I mean, they have a defense again.
Right.
I mean, the defense outscored Western Michigan.
Toledo native Jordan Kovacs put
Yeah.
on some lickings, caused some turnovers.
He caused the fumble that Heron took back.
Offensively, though, they look good. They got the power game back, but I don't know if that's going to fit Denard Robinson, though.
He only had, I think yesterday was, since he's been a starter, the least number of total yards Denard's been accounted
Yeah.
for in
Right.
terms of rushing and throwing, but the defense stepped up.
Yeah.
I didn't like how the defense looked on Western's first drive. Alex Carter is a very solid quarterback, but that's a sign of the coaching with the new defensive coordinator, Matheson. The defense adjusted.
They put blitzes.
They were blitzing Carter from like all different sides. He was getting flustered. I think it's boding well for Michigan. They're not going to be back to what Michigan should be this year, but they're well on their way.
Next year, it'll be scary.
Well, the schedule doesn't work out next year, but
Now, really quick, those two teams play next week, Notre Dame, Michigan, at the Big House at night. Who do you got and why?
Well, if Dane Chris starts and Notre Dame plays like they did last night, well, then you're not going to win. But if Brian Kelly makes adjustments, I can see them beating Michigan. I think they have a little bit better offense than what Western Michigan's bringing in. So.
All right. Well, naturally, I'm going to pick Michigan to win this game. I'm a huge fan, for one. I'm not going to hide that. This is the first night game in the history of Michigan Stadium. The atmosphere there will be absolutely crazy. I don't think Notre Dame's going to be prepared for it. And the fact that Notre Dame's in the midst of a quarterback controversy right now between Christ and Tommy Reese plays right into Greg Madison's defensive unit and right into their hands. But between that and Denard Robinson's ability at quarterback running and passing, Notre Dame will lose this game to Michigan 31-26.
We got a little bit less than a minute to go. Other games, the BCS Buster, Boise State beat up Georgia at the Georgia Dome 35-21.
They play UT in 2 weeks.
Yes.
And we have LSU beat Oregon 40-27. Oregon scored a garbage touchdown pretty much at the end. Who was the most impressive out of all the games? Who was the most impressive, do you think?
To me, I think it's Boise. I know they're the Cinderella every year, they're the sweetheart, but going into the Georgia Dome in Atlanta in front of a very hostile, very pro-UGA crowd, Kellen Moore was just calm, collected. They went down early. They didn't panic. I mean, I think Boise, outside of the one roadblock they might run into in 12 days against the Rockets, I think Boise might be in the national championship game at the end of the year.
There?
I would have to say Alabama looked really good against Kent State.
Yeah.
They gave them the pounding. But other than that, Boise State, and like I said, it's only week 1. So we'll see as the season progresses.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and do Pat's piece. See you then. On top of being the illustrious host of Scores, Goals, and Touchdowns, I also work for the local network that covers high school, UT, and BG sports. And do you know what I get a kick out of the most? Hearing everything people are screaming on the sideline. Now, a lot of what gets said on the field, I can't repeat on this show, but a lot of it is various forms of screaming between players telling one another, I can assure you that you are not going to be getting any yards on me, good sir. One of the other things I enjoy is when one team fumbled, one of the players ran to his sidelines in a fury, yelling at his teammates for not being loud, like their silence somehow caused his fumble. But what stood out to me the most was late in the fourth quarter, one of the players was playing both ways. The entire game was completely gasped and desperately wanted a breather. Coach yelled 3 words, be a senior. Now, as a football player, how can you argue with that? Thank you for watching Scores, Goals, and Touchdowns with Mr. Pat. See you next time.